Some people are abandoned by fate, but the rarest souls are abandoned only until the right person finds them. The first rays of dawn painted the Atlantic shoreline in soft shades of gold as Adrian Romano walked alone along the private stretch of beach behind his oceanfront estate, something he did only on mornings when sleep refused to come. At 36, the white-haired empire builder who ruled one of the most powerful criminal organizations on the East Coast rarely allowed himself silence. Yet the endless rhythm of the waves was one of the few sounds that asked nothing from him. His security team remained nearly 100 yards behind, instructed to give him space unless he called. The cool ocean breeze carried the scent of salt and sea grass while gulls drifted overhead, their cries fading into the steady roar of the surf. Adrian's polished shoes sank slightly into the damp sand as he stared toward the horizon, replaying yesterday's strange conversation with his executive secretary, Olivia Brooks. She had canceled 3 appointments without explanation, insisted that several confidential files be moved to a secure archive, and quietly asked for permission to work late, claiming she needed to verify financial records before an upcoming meeting. That wasn't unusual for Olivia. She had spent 5 years becoming the one person inside his organization everyone trusted without question. Efficient without arrogance, intelligent without seeking attention, and loyal without ever asking for recognition. She had somehow become invisible despite being indispensable. She remembered birthdays he forgot, corrected mistakes before anyone noticed them, and organized chaos with such calm precision that Adrian often joked she kept the entire empire from collapsing while everyone else fought over power. Yet yesterday something had been different. Her smile had looked forced. Her eyes had lingered on him as though she wanted to say something important before deciding against it. He had almost asked what was wrong, but another phone call interrupted the moment, and she simply nodded, gathered her tablet, and disappeared down the hallway. Now, as another wave rolled onto the shore, Adrian noticed something unusual farther down the beach. At first it looked like driftwood tangled in seaweed, left behind by the tide during the night. He narrowed his eyes. The shape was too still, too human. His pace quickened without conscious thought. Every instinct sharpened. The distance closed rapidly until the outline became unmistakable. A young woman lay motionless where the water barely reached the sand, one hand partially buried beneath the incoming tide, while the other remained tightly closed around a small brass key that glimmered whenever sunlight broke through the clouds. Adrian stopped only for a heartbeat before dropping to one knee beside her. Wet strands of chestnut hair covered part of her face. Her breathing was faint but present. His pulse surged the instant he brushed the hair away and recognized the familiar features. Olivia Brooks, his secretary, the woman who had never once missed work without calling. The woman who had quietly protected every secret he possessed. Her skin was pale from the cold morning air, her business jacket soaked with seawater, and grains of sand clung to the sleeve where she still refused to release whatever that small key represented. Adrian's expression hardened into something none of his men had witnessed in years. Behind him, the security detail saw their boss rise with Olivia carefully in his arms, and before a single question could be asked, his voice cut through the crashing waves with terrifying clarity. "Get the car. Now." The black SUV tore through the quiet coastal highway with emergency lights clearing every intersection while Adrian never once took his eyes off Olivia. She rested across the back seat with her head supported by his folded jacket, her breathing shallow enough that every passing second seemed louder than the engine itself. One of his security officers reached carefully toward the small brass key still locked inside her hand. Adrian stopped him with a single glance. "Do not touch it." The command carried no anger, only certainty. If Olivia had protected that key even after everything she had endured, then whatever it opened mattered more than anyone in the vehicle understood. 15 minutes later, the convoy arrived at St. Matthew Medical Center, a private hospital that had quietly treated influential families for decades. Doctors and nurses rushed forward the moment the doors opened, but Adrian remained beside the stretcher until the emergency physician gently stepped between them. "Sir, we need room to work." He nodded once and released the edge of the blanket, watching as Olivia disappeared through the double doors. The hallway suddenly felt colder than the ocean breeze outside. His men stood several feet away, careful not to interrupt the silence surrounding their boss. No one had ever seen Adrian Romano pace. Yet now every measured step echoed across the polished floor as he walked from one end of the waiting area to the other, checking the operating room doors every few seconds as though determination alone could make them open sooner. Nearly 40 minutes passed before a gray-haired physician finally emerged, removing his surgical cap with a tired expression. "She is stable." Adrian exhaled so quietly that only he noticed it. "Will she recover?" The doctor hesitated before answering. She was suffering from severe exhaustion, prolonged exposure to cold, and dehydration. Another 30 minutes on that beach could have changed the outcome completely. Fortunately, someone found her when they did. Adrian looked toward the floor for a brief moment, the words settling heavily inside him. He had negotiated billion-dollar agreements without blinking. He had faced federal investigations and ruthless rivals with complete composure. Yet hearing how close Olivia had come to never waking again unsettled him in a way he could not explain. "When will she regain consciousness?" he asked. "It is impossible to predict. It could be several hours. It could be longer. Right now her body simply needs rest." Adrian thanked the physician with unusual sincerity before walking into the quiet intensive care room after receiving permission. Machines hummed softly while morning sunlight filtered through half-closed blinds, painting pale lines across the white walls. Olivia looked strangely peaceful, almost as though she had simply fallen asleep after another impossibly long workday. For the first time since she had joined his organization 5 years earlier, her desk would remain empty. Adrian pulled a chair beside the bed and noticed something immediately. Her right hand was still tightly closed. The nurses had carefully cleaned away the sand, but somehow they had never managed to remove the small brass key. Even unconscious, her fingers refused to release it. He studied the object without touching it. No label, no engraving, no obvious meaning. Just an ordinary key held with extraordinary determination. His thoughts drifted back through hundreds of ordinary mornings when Olivia had arrived before everyone else, carrying fresh coffee, perfectly organized schedules, and the quiet confidence that every problem already had a solution. He realized with growing discomfort that he knew almost everything about her work and almost nothing about her life. No family photographs, no stories about weekends, no complaints, no requests for vacation. She had quietly devoted years to protecting an empire that was never truly hers. Adrian slowly stood and turned toward the waiting security team outside the glass doors. His voice remained calm, but every word carried unmistakable weight. "Find out where she was yesterday after she left my office. I want every camera, every phone record, every witness, and every minute accounted for." Someone expected Olivia Brooks to disappear. They are about to discover they failed. The investigation began before the sun had reached its highest point. Inside the conference room overlooking the Manhattan skyline, 6 large monitors displayed security footage gathered from traffic cameras, private businesses, parking garages, and nearby intersections. Adrian stood with his hands resting lightly on the polished oak table while every trusted member of his security division worked in complete silence. Nobody dared interrupt his concentration. Olivia's movements from the previous afternoon slowly unfolded across the screens. At 5:15, she left headquarters carrying only her leather briefcase and a small canvas tote bag she often used for documents. At 5:28, she stopped at a neighborhood coffee shop where the cashier remembered her smiling politely while purchasing a cup of black coffee she barely touched. At 6 o'clock, another camera captured her walking toward the underground parking garage where her sedan had been waiting. Then everything changed. The next camera should have recorded her exiting onto Lexington Avenue. Instead, the recording skipped 12 entire minutes before resuming as if nothing unusual had happened. One technician leaned forward, replaying the footage repeatedly. "This was not a camera malfunction," he said quietly. "Someone removed exactly 12 minutes from the original recording." Adrian's expression remained calm, but everyone in the room recognized the dangerous stillness settling over him. Olivia was meticulous. She planned every meeting, every route, every schedule. She never disappeared without explanation. If someone had erased those 12 minutes, they had planned far ahead. Another investigator entered carrying a sealed evidence envelope recovered from Olivia's abandoned vehicle. Her sedan had been discovered parked legally 3 miles from the shoreline, completely locked, with no signs of forced entry. Her wallet remained inside. Her identification was untouched. Even her reading glasses rested neatly on the passenger seat. Only 3 things were missing: her laptop, her encrypted company phone, and a portable hard drive assigned exclusively to confidential executive files. Adrian slowly examined the photographs spread across the table. Nothing looked rushed. Nothing suggested panic. It almost appeared as though Olivia had willingly stepped away from her own car. That conclusion troubled him more than any obvious crime scene could have. One of the analysts finally spoke. Either she trusted whoever approached her, or she believed she had no reason to be afraid. The room became silent again. Adrian remembered something so small he had almost forgotten it. 2 weeks earlier, Olivia had quietly requested permission to upgrade the company's document encryption system. When he jokingly asked whether she expected someone to steal paperwork, she had smiled gently before answering, "Sometimes. People do not steal documents. They steal opportunities." At the time, he had laughed and approved the expense without another thought. Now those words echoed differently inside his mind. Opportunities. Secrets. Timing. Someone had not been targeting random information. They had been searching for something specific. A security officer hurried into the room, holding a transparent evidence bag. "Sir, we found this hidden beneath the driver's seat." Inside rested a folded receipt from a 24-hour locksmith located on the opposite side of the city. The transaction had occurred less than 12 hours before Olivia disappeared. Adrian stared at the faded paper before glancing toward the brass key, still resting in his pocket after hospital staff reluctantly allowed him to safeguard it until Olivia awoke. The locksmith receipt listed no description of the key, only a handwritten note in blue ink. 1 copy only. Customer declined duplicates. Adrian looked around the room and realized the mystery had grown far larger than anyone imagined. Olivia had gone out of her way to create a key that nobody else could duplicate, then somehow protected it even while unconscious on an empty beach. Whatever that key unlocked had been important enough for her to risk everything. And for the first time since the investigation began, Adrian understood one undeniable truth. His secretary had not simply become the victim of terrible circumstances. She had been carrying a secret so valuable that someone had been willing to erase an entire night just to keep it hidden. While specialists continued working to restore fragments of missing surveillance footage, Adrian chose a different path. He had learned long ago that technology revealed facts, but ordinary people often revealed truth. Before sunset, he visited the coffee shop where Olivia had stopped the evening before she disappeared. The owner recognized her immediately. "She came here almost every Thursday," the elderly woman said while wiping the counter. "Always polite. Always ordered the same black coffee. Yesterday, she looked distracted. She kept checking the front window like she expected someone." Adrian listened without interrupting. "Did she meet anyone?" The woman hesitated before nodding. "Not exactly." A young delivery driver walked in, placed a white envelope beside her coffee, and left without saying a word. She waited almost a full minute before opening it. "Did you see what was inside?" "No. But after reading it, she looked frightened for the first time since I have known her." Adrian thanked the woman and quietly purchased every security recording from the business. The footage confirmed her story. The driver's face remained hidden beneath a baseball cap, but one detail stood out. The envelope carried no address and no company logo. It had been prepared specifically for Olivia. Less than an hour later, another lead surfaced. The locksmith whose receipt had been found beneath Olivia's driver's seat remembered her as well. She asked unusual questions. The middle-aged craftsman explained while searching his handwritten order book. "Most customers want duplicates." She wanted exactly the opposite. She wanted a brand new key cut from a custom blank and asked me to destroy every leftover piece of metal afterward. Adrian placed the brass key on the counter. The locksmith adjusted his glasses before slowly nodding. "That is the one. I have never made another like it." "Did she tell you what it opened?" "No. She only smiled and said, 'If someone asks for another copy, tell them it never existed.'" Those words lingered in Adrian's mind long after he left the shop. Olivia had never acted dramatically. If she took such extraordinary precautions, she must have believed someone was already watching her. As evening settled over Manhattan, another investigator rushed into headquarters carrying fresh information recovered from traffic cameras several blocks away from Olivia's parked sedan. A dark gray luxury sedan had followed her vehicle through 4 consecutive intersections without attempting to pass. The license plate was fake, but the driving pattern revealed discipline rather than coincidence. Whoever occupied that car knew exactly where Olivia was going. Adrian replayed the footage several times. Every turn matched hers. Every stop mirrored hers. Yet the vehicle vanished only moments before the missing 12-minute gap began. Professional surveillance, one investigator concluded quietly. Adrian remained silent until another analyst entered holding Olivia's office access records. "Sir, there is something else." Olivia had returned to headquarters late Tuesday night after everyone else had gone home. She remained inside exactly 23 minutes before leaving again. No meetings, no phone calls, no scheduled appointments. Only one room had been accessed during that visit. The secure archive containing executive financial records. Adrian slowly walked into Olivia's empty office for the first time since the investigation began. Everything remained exactly as she had left it. Color-coded folders rested in perfect alignment. A framed photograph of the New York skyline sat beside her computer monitor. Fresh lavender in a small glass vase had begun to wilt after 2 days without water. It was an ordinary office belonging to an extraordinary woman. Then his attention settled on the small desk calendar she always updated by hand despite using digital scheduling software. Every appointment appeared perfectly normal except one square marked only with a tiny pencil drawing of a lighthouse instead of words. Adrian stared at the simple sketch for several long seconds before looking toward the hospital across the river where Olivia still lay unconscious. Whatever secret she had been protecting had not begun on that beach. It had begun days earlier, and she had quietly left behind a trail that only someone willing to truly see her would ever notice. That night, Adrian remained alone inside Olivia's office long after the rest of the building had emptied. The skyline shimmered beyond the floor-to-ceiling windows, but his attention never drifted from the quiet details scattered across her desk. For 5 years he had walked past this room almost every day, believing he knew the woman who worked there. Now every object seemed to ask the same question. How much had he failed to notice? He opened the bottom drawer, expecting ordinary office supplies, but instead found a collection of neatly labeled notebooks dating back to Olivia's first month with the company. They were not personal journals. They were records. Every page documented problems before they became disasters. One notebook described how she had quietly caught a fraudulent invoice that would have cost the organization millions of dollars. Another detailed how she had recognized inconsistencies in a shipping contract that eventually exposed an outside company attempting to manipulate one of Adrian's legitimate businesses. None of the reports carried her name. Every solution had been credited to the department involved, never to herself. Adrian slowly turned another page and paused. A handwritten note from 4 years earlier simply read, "If the boss signs this agreement today, he will inherit someone else's debt. Delay the meeting by any reasonable excuse." He remembered that day clearly. Olivia had walked into his office claiming the visiting investors had been delayed by unexpected traffic. Irritated at the time, he had postponed the meeting until the following morning, only to learn overnight that the investors were under federal investigation for financial crimes. She had never explained why she insisted on the delay, and he had never asked. Another notebook contained reminders that seemed almost invisible unless someone looked carefully. Send flowers to Mrs. Martinez after her surgery. Renew scholarships for employee families before August. Schedule annual bonuses 2 weeks early because several staff members have children starting school. Adrian frowned. None of those responsibilities belonged to a secretary. Yet somehow Olivia had quietly turned his organization into a place where ordinary employees felt remembered. His eyes settled on a faded envelope tucked between 2 notebooks. Inside rested dozens of handwritten thank you cards from receptionists, drivers, accountants, maintenance workers, and security officers. Every message expressed gratitude for anonymous kindnesses they had never known came from Olivia. One employee thanked an unnamed co-worker for secretly paying hospital parking fees while his wife received cancer treatments. Another thanked someone for replacing a broken laptop before college finals. A third simply wrote, "Whoever believes in second chances saved my family." Adrian recognized none of these stories because Olivia had never spoken about them. She had simply acted and moved on. A soft knock interrupted the silence. Samuel Hayes, the company's oldest accountant, stepped into the office carrying a worn file folder. "I heard you were here," he said quietly. "There is something you should probably know." Samuel placed the folder on the desk. 5 years ago, before Olivia accepted your job offer, she interviewed with 3 Fortune 500 companies. Every one of them offered significantly higher salaries. Adrian looked up in surprise. "Why did she choose us?" Samuel smiled gently. "She told me that powerful organizations need honest people more than comfortable ones do." The words settled heavily over the room. Adrian looked around the office once more and suddenly understood why everyone trusted Olivia without hesitation. It had never been because she worked for him. It was because she quietly served everyone around her without expecting recognition. As he closed the final notebook, a folded sheet of paper slipped onto the floor. Across the top, written in Olivia's unmistakable handwriting, were 8 simple words that made Adrian's heart stop for a moment. "If anything happens to me, trust the lighthouse first." Morning sunlight filtered softly through the hospital window, warming the quiet room where machines measured time with gentle, steady rhythms. Adrian had not left the chair beside Olivia's bed since the previous evening. Reports continued arriving from investigators. Phones continued ringing outside the room, and meetings continued without him, yet none of it seemed as important as the woman lying peacefully before him. For the first time in years, the empire he had spent his life building could wait. Shortly after 9 o'clock, the heart monitor changed its pattern ever so slightly. Adrian looked up from the notebook he had been reading and noticed the smallest movement. Olivia's fingers tightened for a brief moment around the brass key resting safely beneath the blanket. Then her eyelashes fluttered. A nurse immediately stepped closer while Adrian remained perfectly still, afraid that even speaking might interrupt the fragile moment. Slowly, Olivia opened her eyes. The bright room seemed unfamiliar as she searched the ceiling before turning her head toward the chair beside her. Recognition appeared almost instantly. Her voice was barely louder than a whisper, strained from exhaustion but calm. "You are here." Adrian allowed himself the faintest smile. "I am." The nurse performed a brief examination, checked her vital signs, and quietly assured them that Olivia was recovering well before leaving the room to notify the physician. Silence returned. Outside the window, gulls drifted over the river while traffic moved through another ordinary Manhattan morning. Inside, neither of them spoke for several long seconds. Adrian expected questions. He expected confusion, fear, or concern about her condition. Instead, Olivia looked directly into his eyes and asked only one thing. "Did anyone take the key?" Adrian reached into his jacket pocket and carefully placed the brass key in her open hand. Relief immediately softened her expression. She closed her fingers around it with quiet gratitude before taking a slow breath. "Good," she whispered. "Then there is still time." Adrian leaned forward slightly. "Olivia, what does it open?" She studied the key without answering immediately. "Something that cannot fall into the wrong hands." "Who was following you?" Again she hesitated, not from fear but from careful thought. Someone who believed loyalty could be purchased. Adrian listened closely, recognizing that every word cost her energy. "You do not have to explain everything today." Olivia gave a faint smile. "I know, but you deserve the truth." She glanced toward the window before continuing. "The lighthouse on my calendar was never a meeting. It was a place. Inside there is a safety deposit box that belongs to an attorney who retired years ago. I discovered financial records proving that someone has been secretly redirecting money through legitimate businesses to damage your reputation. They expected you to sign documents without noticing the changes." Adrian remained silent. She continued. "I copied the evidence onto the missing hard drive. When I realized someone else knew, I separated everything. The hard drive disappeared, but the key stayed with me. Without both pieces, the documents cannot be opened." Adrian finally understood why she had refused to let go of it, even while unconscious. The key was never valuable by itself. It protected something much greater. Olivia looked at him again, her expression unexpectedly gentle. "I was never worried about myself." She paused, gathering enough strength to finish the sentence. "I was worried that they would reach you before I could." Adrian lowered his eyes for a brief moment, absorbing the weight of those words. She had spent years protecting him quietly, asking for nothing in return, and even after everything that had happened, her first concern remained someone else. In that silent hospital room, surrounded by nothing more than sunlight and the quiet sound of steady breathing, Adrian realized that true loyalty did not announce itself. It simply endured, even when no one was watching. Later that afternoon, Adrian left the hospital carrying only the brass key and the folded note Olivia had trusted him to find. Two vehicles traveled quietly along the coastal highway until the skyline disappeared behind stretches of weathered dunes and windswept grass. At the end of a narrow road stood the old lighthouse Olivia had marked with nothing more than a simple pencil drawing on her calendar. It had not guided ships for decades, yet someone had preserved the building with remarkable care. Fresh paint covered the white walls, the windows were spotless, and an American flag moved gently in the ocean breeze above the entrance. Waiting outside was an elderly attorney named Charles Whitmore, the retired legal advisor Olivia had mentioned. He greeted Adrian with calm eyes that showed neither surprise nor fear. "I was wondering when you would arrive," he said quietly. Adrian removed the brass key from his pocket. "She told me this belonged here." Charles nodded and unlocked the front door before leading him through the circular stone hallway into a modest office beneath the lighthouse tower. Against one wall rested a steel safety deposit cabinet unlike anything found in ordinary banks. There was no keypad, no electronic display, only a carefully crafted lock designed decades earlier. Adrian inserted the key. A soft click echoed through the room. Inside rested a sealed envelope, several notarized financial ledgers, and a portable solid-state drive identical in appearance to the one investigators believed had vanished. Charles gently smiled. Olivia anticipated that someone would search for the obvious storage device. She created a decoy and quietly left the real evidence here 3 weeks ago. Adrian looked up. She knew this was coming? She hoped she was wrong, Charles replied. But hope is not the same as preparation. Together they reviewed the documents one page at a time. Every record connected the same name. Daniel Mercer, a respected executive who had managed several legitimate investment companies working alongside Adrian's organization for nearly 7 years. Mercer had secretly established shell corporations that redirected funds, falsified reports, and positioned Adrian to unknowingly approve transactions that would eventually destroy his public reputation. Olivia had uncovered the inconsistencies while performing a routine audit no one else considered important. Rather than accusing anyone without proof, she had spent months collecting verified documentation until every page supported the next. Adrian stared silently at the growing stack of evidence. Daniel Mercer had attended family celebrations, holiday dinners, and charity events beside him. He had shaken his hand hundreds of times while quietly constructing a betrayal behind polished smiles and expensive suits. Charles closed the final ledger before speaking again. Olivia asked me to wait until one of two things happened. Either she returned herself, or someone she trusted completely arrived carrying that key. Adrian lowered his eyes for a moment. She trusted me that much? The attorney answered without hesitation. She trusted your character more than your position. She believed that if you ever learned the whole truth, you would choose what was right over what was easy. Those words settled heavily inside the quiet lighthouse. Adrian gathered the documents with deliberate care before looking once more through the tall window toward the endless Atlantic. The mystery that had begun beside the waves was no longer a mystery. It was a test of loyalty, patience, and integrity that Olivia had faced almost entirely alone. As the afternoon sun reflected across the ocean, Adrian understood that exposing Daniel Mercer would not simply protect his organization. It would restore the honor of the one person who had guarded everyone else while asking for nothing except the chance to do the right thing. The following evening, Adrian summoned every senior executive, financial advisor, and regional manager to the top-floor conference room overlooking the city. No explanation accompanied the invitation, only a simple instruction that attendance was mandatory. By 7 o'clock, every chair was occupied except one. Daniel Mercer entered last, offering his usual confident smile as though nothing in the world had changed. He greeted familiar faces, poured himself a cup of coffee, and took his place without noticing that Adrian had remained standing instead of sitting at the head of the table. The room felt unusually quiet. No casual conversations, no laughter, only the faint sound of rain tapping against the tall windows. Adrian slowly placed a leather portfolio on the polished table and looked around the room before speaking. For years I believed loyalty was measured by words. I was wrong. Loyalty is measured by what people choose to do when nobody is watching. Several executives exchanged uncertain glances. Daniel remained perfectly composed. Adrian opened the portfolio and removed the first financial ledger. Then another. Then another. Every document was neatly arranged in front of him. Someone inside this organization spent years building a second set of books designed to redirect legitimate investments into companies that existed only on paper. Daniel finally leaned forward. That is a serious accusation. Adrian calmly nodded. It is. Which is why I waited until every page had been verified by independent accountants and legal counsel. He slid the notarized records across the table. Silence settled over the room as executives carefully examined signatures, account numbers, transfer histories, and audit confirmations. Every page connected to the same network of shell companies. Every transaction pointed toward the same executive authorization. Daniel Mercer. The confident smile gradually disappeared from Daniel's face. There must be some misunderstanding, he said quietly. Adrian reached into the portfolio one final time and placed the portable solid-state drive beside the documents. There was never a misunderstanding. There was only patience. The drive contained archived emails, financial reconciliations, and time-stamped revisions that confirmed Olivia had uncovered the irregularities months earlier while conducting a routine compliance review. Instead of making immediate accusations, she had carefully documented every finding, protecting both the company and the innocent employees who could have been harmed by false allegations. Adrian looked around the room once more. The person responsible believed destroying evidence would erase the truth. They underestimated someone whose integrity could not be intimidated. Every eye shifted away from Adrian and toward Daniel. No one raised a voice. No one argued. There was nothing left to debate. The evidence spoke more clearly than anger ever could. After several long moments, Daniel quietly lowered his head. Security officers waiting outside entered only after Adrian gave a small nod. They approached respectfully and escorted Daniel from the conference room without struggle, accusation, or humiliation. The door closed gently behind them. The room remained silent. Adrian rested both hands on the table before addressing everyone who remained. Many of you believed Olivia Brooks was only my secretary. You were mistaken. She protected this organization with honesty when the rest of us were too busy protecting our titles. Several employees lowered their eyes, remembering the countless quiet kindnesses she had shown without asking for recognition. Others simply sat in thoughtful silence, realizing how easily genuine character had been overlooked. Adrian closed the leather portfolio and looked toward the empty chair where Daniel had been sitting only minutes earlier. Wealth had earned influence. Position had earned authority. But neither had survived the quiet strength of one woman who refused to compromise her principles. And in that room filled with powerful people, dignity became the only voice that truly mattered. 3 months later, the first cool breeze of autumn drifted through Manhattan as employees quietly gathered inside the headquarters before the workday began. The atmosphere felt different now. Conversations were warmer. Smiles came more easily. The organization had survived not because of power or influence, but because one person had chosen integrity when no one seemed to be watching. At precisely 8 o'clock, the elevator doors opened, and Olivia Brooks stepped into the lobby carrying the same leather portfolio she had carried for years. She looked healthy again, her confidence restored, though the experience had left behind a quiet wisdom that could be seen in her gentle eyes. The room gradually fell silent before something unexpected happened. One employee stood, then another. Within seconds, every receptionist, accountant, security officer, assistant, and executive had risen to welcome her back. No one had been instructed to do it. No announcement had been made. It was simply the only response that felt right. Olivia stopped for a moment, visibly surprised by the gesture. She smiled with genuine humility and softly thanked everyone before making her way toward her office. When she reached the executive floor, she paused once more. Her old desk was gone. In its place stood a beautifully crafted workstation directly beside Adrian Romano's office, positioned not as an assistant's desk, but as an equal member of the executive leadership team. Resting neatly at its center was a simple brass nameplate. It read, Executive Secretary. Beneath the title, engraved in smaller letters, were 6 words she had never expected to see. Loyalty is remembered. Olivia gently touched the edge of the plaque before looking toward Adrian, who had quietly stepped out of his office. For a brief moment, neither of them spoke. Some gratitude is too meaningful for speeches. Adrian finally broke the silence with a calm smile. "Welcome back, Olivia." She nodded. "It is good to be back." He handed her a slim folder containing updated organizational policies. Over the past several weeks, every financial safeguard she had recommended had been fully implemented. Employee scholarship programs had expanded. Anonymous assistance funds had doubled. Independent audits would now become standard practice. The lessons she had quietly lived for years had finally become part of the organization's culture. As the morning continued, ordinary work resumed. Phones rang. Meetings filled the calendar. Coffee cups appeared on desks. Yet something invisible had changed forever. People no longer overlooked the quiet individuals who kept everything running behind the scenes. They listened more carefully. They thanked one another more often. They recognized that character could exist without seeking attention. Later that evening, Adrian returned alone to the same stretch of beach where he had found Olivia months earlier. The tide rolled gently across the sand, while the setting sun painted the horizon with shades of amber and deep blue. He stood in silence, remembering how close he had come to losing the one person who had protected his future without ever asking for recognition. The ocean offered no answers, only perspective. Power could command respect for a season. Wealth could purchase comfort for a lifetime. But neither could replace the trust earned by a faithful heart. Adrian looked toward the endless water before quietly turning back toward home, knowing the strongest foundation he had ever built was not his empire, but the people whose integrity held it together. And on that peaceful evening, as the waves continued their timeless journey to the shore, the world quietly remembered what dignity truly looks like.